So, I got a call from one of my favorite cousins. She's in a panic. She said, "Please come help me. You know that house that you helped me move into, like, 2 years ago?" "Yeah." "Well, the HOA president has lost his mind." "What happened?" "He had my tractor towed." Now, first of all, I was confused, because I didn't even know she had a tractor. So, I'm like, wait, back up a second. What do you mean your tractor got towed? She says, well, I was having some land cleared, and they needed the tractor to do it. And I was inside making lunch, and then I came out, and the tractor was just gone. I'm like, you're kidding. Did it get stolen? No. I saw the tow truck pulling away with it. I said, okay, I'm on my way. So I hop in the car and drive over there. It's about 30 minutes away, and when I get there, she is fuming. She's got paperwork out, she's talking on the phone, trying to get the towing company, trying to get the HOA president, trying to get everybody involved. So, I say, alright, let me see what's going on. She points over to the empty lot next to her house. That's where the tractor was. Now, mind you, it's not even on the street, it's not blocking anything. It's literally on the edge of her property, kind of half on her property, half on the common ground. So, technically, there might be a gray area. But the point is, it wasn't causing a problem. So, I say, let's go talk to the HOA president. Now, she's like, I already tried, he won't talk to me, he's being a jerk. I said, alright, well, let me give it a shot. So, I walk over, knock on the guy's door. He opens it, sees me, and says, are you with that tractor lady? I said, yes, I am. He says, tell her she can't park construction equipment in the neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood, not a farm. I said, well, sir, it wasn't really parked, it was being used, and it wasn't even on the street. It was on the edge of her lot. He says, doesn't matter. It's an eyesore, and it's against the rules. I say, well, what rule exactly? He says, read the handbook. I say, okay, we will. But right now, we need to get the tractor back. He says, good luck, it's at Joe's Towing, and they're not open until tomorrow. So, I go back to my cousin, and we start looking through the HOA rules. Now, there is a rule that says you can't park commercial vehicles overnight, and you can't store equipment in your yard, but it doesn't say anything about temporary use of equipment. And more importantly, it says that if there's a violation, the HOA has to give you a written notice in 72 hours to correct the issue before taking any action. Well, she didn't get any notice. Nothing on her door, nothing in the mail, no email, no call, nothing. So, they violated their own procedure. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, the tractor didn't even belong to her. That's when it got interesting. I said, wait, this isn't your tractor? She says, no, it's my friend's. He let me borrow it. He's military, it's actually a surplus vehicle he bought from the government. And that's when I had an idea. I said, let me see the paperwork on the tractor. She pulls it up, and sure enough, it still has the government tag on it, and it's technically registered to the Department of Defense. Even though her friend owns it, it's still in transition, and the paperwork is complicated. So, technically, the HOA just towed a military vehicle without permission. That's a big no-no. So, I make a few calls. I have a friend who works on a base nearby, and I ask him if this is something that can be pursued. He says, absolutely. In fact, it might even be a federal issue. So, now we're talking potential federal charges against the towing company and maybe even the HOA. So, the next day, we go down to Joe's Towing. The place is a dump, and the guy at the front desk is not helpful. He says, yeah, we got the tractor, but you can't take it without proof of ownership. We show him the paperwork, but because it's still technically owned by the DoD, he says we need a military release form. I call my friend again, he says, give me a minute. About an hour later, a very official-looking government vehicle pulls up. 2 guys in uniform get out, and they walk in like they own the place. They show the towing guy their badges and say, you towed government property. That's a problem. The guy turns pale. He starts stammering, saying he didn't know, he was just doing what the HOA told him to do. They say, that's not how this works. You should have checked the registration. Now you're looking at possible charges. The guy says, please don't press charges, I'll give it back, no charge. The military guys say, oh, you're definitely giving it back, but whether we press charges isn't up to you. They hook up the tractor to their own transport and haul it out of there. Meanwhile, my cousin is standing there with the biggest grin on her face. She turns to me and says, that guy is going to regret messing with me. I said, he already does. But it didn't stop there. The military filed a formal complaint with the HOA, and now the president is under investigation. Turns out, this isn't the first time he's overstepped. There have been multiple complaints against him for abuse of power, targeting residents, and generally being a tyrant. So, the board called an emergency meeting, and guess what? He got removed. My cousin was there, she said it was glorious. People were cheering. One lady brought cookies. Now, the new president is a lot more reasonable, and they're even reviewing the HOA rules to make them less restrictive. So, in the end, my cousin got her land cleared, the tractor went back to its owner, and the HOA got a much-needed shakeup. And the former president? Well, he's probably still trying to figure out how it all went so wrong. Let this be a lesson. Don't mess with people over petty power trips, especially when government property is involved. You never know who's connected or how fast it can all blow up in your FAC. There I was, standing on that dusty road, watching that woman in her designer suit point at my John Deere tractor, strapped to the flatbed truck, while she screamed about property values. That's when I told her, the tractor you're towing isn't just mine, ma'am, it belongs to the United States military. The look on her face? Priceless. How quickly can an HOA president's power trip turn into a federal offense? I'm about to show you. At 68, after 30 years serving my country in the Army Corps of Engineers, I finally claimed my small piece of the American dream, 40 acres of fertile land on the outskirts of peaceful Meadowbrook, Virginia. These rolling fields had been family farmland for generations, before developers started buying up neighboring parcels for what they called premium planned communities. Martha, my wife of 42 years, and I were meticulous during the purchase. Our property bordered the newly established Willow Creek Estates HOA community but wasn't incorporated within it. I still have the paperwork, where our real estate agent, Jim Donaldson, explicitly confirmed our agricultural activities were protected under grandfathered county zoning laws dating back to 1952. This is still classified as agricultural land, Frank, Jim had said. They can build all the fancy developments they want around you, but your right to farm this land is protected by Virginia state law. That's all I wanted, to tend my crops, raise my cattle, and spend my golden years working the land in my workshop converted barn, that stands about 300 yards from our modest two-bedroom farmhouse. Martha had her quilting circle on Tuesdays. I had my veterans coffee group on Thursdays. And we had Sunday dinners with our daughter's family, who lived just 20 minutes away in Riverdale. The crown jewel of my operation was my John Deere 5075E utility tractor, a military-grade model I'd earned through the Department of Defense's Veteran Equipment Preservation Program. This little-known initiative, established in 2012, loans specially equipped tractors and farming equipment to qualified veterans, who maintain them for both agricultural use and educational purposes. Every quarter, I'd host visits from local schools, where children could learn about farming, engineering, and military history. The paperwork was exhaustive and explicit. While I was the caretaker responsible for the vehicle's maintenance and preservation, it remained the property of the United States government. Each quarterly inspection by the DoD representative reinforced this arrangement. "You're doing good work here, Frank," Major Williams had told me during his last visit. "Teaching these kids about their heritage, both agricultural and military, that's something special." For the first 8 months, everything was perfect. Then Cynthia Davenport moved into the largest house in Willow Creek Estates and set her sights on neighborhood leadership. Cynthia Davenport was 55, a former pharmaceutical executive who'd taken early retirement after her company merged with a larger corporation. According to neighborhood gossip, she'd received a substantial golden parachute and was determined to transform our rural community into something resembling her former Connecticut suburb. Her election campaign for HOA president featured professionally printed yard signs proclaiming, increasing property values through premium aesthetic standards. A slogan that made my neighbor, Bob Watson, mutter, translation? Make this place too expensive for the locals who've been here for generations. 2 weeks after winning the election, with just 32 votes, Cynthia's first official act was distributing a memo to all Willow Creek residents and adjacent property owners. The 4-page document, bearing the association's newly designed gold embossed logo, laid out her vision. Unsightly equipment, unauthorized livestock, improvised structures, and rural disorder negatively impacting Willow Creek property values will no longer be tolerated under the Enhanced Community Standards Initiative. Though my property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, the final paragraph claimed their covenants extended to visual corridors affecting community aesthetics as viewed from association roadways and common areas. When the memo arrived, Martha sighed. Here we go, another city person who wants country views without country living. Being a firm believer in addressing concerns directly, I invited Cynthia for coffee the following Saturday. She arrived in a white Range Rover, dressed in a navy blue business suit that looked completely out of place in our rural setting. In my kitchen, I calmly showed her my agricultural zoning documentation, property boundaries, and explained the military significance of the tractor she'd labeled unsightly in her memo. I even invited her to the upcoming quarterly educational event, where local 4th graders would learn about farm machinery and military support equipment. My first small victory came during that very event. Several Willow Creek residents, bringing their grandchildren, openly praised my farm's contribution to the community. Dr. James Harris, a retired history professor who'd recently moved into Willow Creek, was particularly enthusiastic. This is exactly why we chose this location, he told the gathering. The blend of rural heritage with modern amenities. My grandkids learn more in an hour here than from a week of iPad games. Cynthia stood at the periphery throughout the event, her smile tightening as she watched children climb on the carefully maintained John Deere under my supervision. When the crowd dispersed, she approached me. The children's program is quaint, she conceded reluctantly, but that doesn't change the fact that this equipment is visible from our community entrance. That green monstrosity has to go. She gestured toward the tractor. Rules are rules, Mr. Harrison. But they're not your rules to enforce on my property, I reminded her, gently adjusting my cowboy hat. She glanced around at my farm, taking in the worn overalls I was wearing. We'll see about that. Cynthia's campaign intensified with methodical precision. First came weekly certified letters, demanding removal of what she termed derelict machinery and non-conforming equipment. Each letter grew progressively more formal, the third one coming from Winston and Leeds, attorneys at law. Though I later discovered this was simply her brother-in-law's firm from Baltimore. When I responded with copies of my legal documentation and property surveys, she pivoted to noise complaints about morning farm operations. According to her, my 7 a.m. tractor work constituted nuisance noise violations during residential quiet hours. My second victory arrived unexpectedly when the county zoning inspector, Miguel Sanchez, visited after Cynthia filed a formal complaint. Rather than issuing violations, he spent 2 hours touring my operation. Mr. Harrison, your setup here is exactly the type of agricultural heritage our County Planning Commission aims to preserve, Miguel explained, taking photos of the John Deere. I'd like to feature this in our Historical Society newsletter, if you don't mind. It's a perfect example of how modern communities can coexist with our rural roots. When he left, he handed me his card with his personal cell number written on the back. Just in case you encounter any further misunderstandings about your zoning rights. Furious at this setback, Cynthia escalated to daily property surveillance. Every morning, at precisely 8:15 a.m., her Range Rover would park along the dirt access road leading to my property, and she would photograph my farming activities, documenting what she termed violations in a leather-bound notebook. The situation reached a turning point when my security camera, installed after Martha noticed our mailbox had been tampered with, captured Cynthia stepping onto our property for closer photographs of the tractor. The footage clearly showed her in her business suit, ducking under the split rail fence marking our property line. When Sheriff's Deputy Thomas Cooper responded to my trespassing report, he reviewed the footage and paid Cynthia an official visit. This third victory was particularly satisfying when I learned she'd received a formal warning that any further unauthorized entry onto our property would result in charges. She tried to claim she was standing in the easement, Deputy Cooper told me later at our Veterans Coffee Group. I had to explain the difference between a utility easement and private property to someone with a lawyer on speed dial. He chuckled. Some folks move to the country but bring city entitlement with them. Believing we'd finally established boundaries, Martha and I felt comfortable accepting our daughter's invitation to spend 4 days helping after the birth of our first grandchild. Before leaving, I parked the John Deere along the dirt access road, after finishing some fieldwork fully on my property, but admittedly visible from the main road approaching Willow Creek Estates. We returned home on a Thursday afternoon, arms full of baby pictures and handmade gifts from our daughter. As we turned onto the dirt access road leading to our farm, I immediately noticed something wrong. The space where my John Deere tractor had been parked was conspicuously empty. Someone stole the tractor, I said, already reaching for my phone to call Sheriff Cooper. While I was explaining the situation to dispatch, Martha called out from the front porch. Frank, there's an envelope taped to the door. Inside was a printed notice on Willow Creek Estates letterhead. Notice of nuisance abatement action. Pursuant to Community Protection Ordinance 15C, equipment in violation of aesthetic standards has been removed. Contact Hillside Impound for retrieval information. The signature at the bottom in flowing blue ink. Cynthia Davenport, HOA President.